Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Optimizing Mother podcast. I am so excited for our guest today. Ester Zirkind is a beloved teacher, shlucha, and writer, guest on the podcast as well. She lives in Toronto with her family, and her memoir, Where's the Daughter I Raised, depicts a challenging period of her life when everything she'd learned in abstraction was put to the test, forcing her to internalize the Torah lessons of her youth, making them real. And when you read her book, make sure you got tissues. In her writing, she chooses not to sugarcoat, preferring to authentically illustrate her journey through illness and tragedy, which ultimately led to triumphant self-discovery and the decision to live life fully, happily, with true gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And yeah, that's really what comes out of everything I've seen and heard from Esther. Like such positivity, you wouldn't even imagine that the woman who went through everything in that book is literally the one that you're listening to. And she has another new book, The 13th Gate, and this one's a novel, and it's an exploration of intergenerational struggles and the power of faith, forgiveness, and family ties. It examines some hot-button issues facing our community with insight, authenticity, and finesse. Her boundless vitality fuels everything she does. This is such a fun bio to read because it literally describes her. She views her speaking engagements as an opportunity to reach a wider audience, that's all of you listening today, in a bigger classroom and gift them with clarity, practicality, and humor. And Esther is always caught speaking on an extensive range of topics, often drawing from her life's adventures to bring positive energy to her listeners. And I'm sure we're all going to benefit so much today. So after that extensive intro, hello, Esther, welcome.
Hi. So nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Let's dive right in. So your first book, Where is the Daughter I Raised? It was heart-wrenching. It was inspiring. You know, my friends were sharing it and passing it around. And you hinted to it a little bit in the description of the book, but I'd love to hear from you. We're mothers, educators, and we'd love some insight. Like, can you share which earlier childhood experiences or what your background that you had that gave you the strength to overcome such intense challenges like you describe in your book?
So when I was going through everything that I was going through, I didn't really realize how much I was relying on childhood. So interesting. Only in hindsight did I realize that which I had absorbed from home and from my teachers were actually buoying me. They were like supporting me.
For those of the listeners that didn't read your book, do you want to just share in one line?
Golly. So when I was 25, I experienced what's called a molar pregnancy, which is a pregnancy that it's not viable and it has to be removed. And I got very, very sick while I was pregnant with that pregnancy. And then I had to be watched. And while I was being watched, the doctors realized that this wasn't going to go away so easy. And then it entered the bad pregnancy, the bad cells entered into my uterine wall and it started to grow in there and it became cancerous. And that Yana that tumor could have, Baruch Hashem it didn't, but it could have grown up into my lungs and into my brain. And that would have been, over. I actually found out about my diagnosis on my 26th birthday. So it was like,
wow.
Yeah. So basically I was in and out of hospital and that was 4 years. And during those 4 years, I had this miracle child called Baruch Menachem Mendel. And when he was 2 years old, 2 and a bit, he contracted chickenpox. And, I woke up one day to discover that he had actually left us, that he was nifter in the night, which was a complete shock to every cell of my being and every part of my life. So, I speak about this, that I had cancer and he had chickenpox and exactly who was slated to die. And I kind of grappled with that so terribly long. And, so I just dived right in.
That's what we love about you. You're just so authentic, so real.
No, because you asked me what about my childhood experiences that buoyed me, that helped me. And I remember realizing only at that moment when my family doctor, because my house filled up very, very quickly that morning. It was Gimel Nissan. And one of the people that came in was my doctor, and he's a firm man, and he always shared Divrei Torah with me whenever I went to, for whatever I needed to go for. And he is a very special person. And I looked at him, I said, I'm really going to have to use all of my time and knowledge now to help me through this. Anyway, so I don't think that my childhood was easy. I think that, and I'm not going to go into lots of details here, but childhood for me, I wasn't handed things on a silver platter. I had to fight for a lot of things. I had to work hard. I remember saying to my mother many years ago, when I was a child, I remember telling her, I'm so happy that, we weren't gifted with ease. I'm so happy that happened, because we have to really, we really have to strive. We really have to work at things. And Baruch Hashem, it makes us strong. I remember saying that to her. She was very delighted to hear that I had that attitude. I don't think this is something I've come to realize, actually. I am not unique. Everybody thinks that they're unique, I realize that I'm not so unique, that my experience and my adventures through life are actually mirrored by millions and billions of people, there's nothing new under the sun kind of thing. So I think that if my childhood was difficult, I think that probably many millions of people's childhoods are difficult. And it's not easy to be a child, but children do struggle. And, you feel your own vulnerability, but you're not aware of it because you're too young to have that vocabulary. So you're too young to articulate it even to yourself. So, I think that what happens in childhood for all of us ends up being very precious later on in life. So, for example, my mother it wasn't an easy life, but I remember that she was not afraid to show emotion. She wasn't afraid to be present through her emotions. She wasn't afraid to struggle and to show us what struggle looks like, and then to come out at the other end. So even though when I was going through my own struggles and I would look at her and think, I can't do that. I can't be her, right? Because I didn't feel that I could find the strength within myself to be my mother, who really was a role model of strength. And as time went on, it seems that Baruch Hashem, don't ask me how I did it, because I don't know exactly how. People do ask me how, but I don't know exactly how. Just what I think a lot of things that my mother had told me just, became part of who I am in essence. For example, there was so many things she said. She said things like, nobody has the monopoly on pain. Things that, Esther, I know that you think and your husband are going to feel and you're going to really believe in it. For you right now, it's true that you're suffering the greatest pain in the world. There is no pain more than this pain. But you have to look around and see that everybody is suffering. There isn't a single human being on this world that isn't suffering. And when you can actually focus and see that others are suffering and feel another person's pain, then you will be beginning to heal. So long as you are completely absorbed in your own pain, I think that my mother was worried about me. And she had good reason to. She had good reason to. She came by that worry very honestly. I had been, in and out of hospital for 3.75 years before our son passed away. And I just didn't conceive of being able to survive this pain. I just didn't think that was possible. And my mother was concerned that was actually going to happen to me. And she did not, of course, a mother doesn't want to see that in her child. So she redirected me to understand that we are all in this world to struggle. That's really true.
It's interesting because you spoke about your mother's concern when you were going through the challenges and how she tried to redirect you. But I still love to ask again, what were some of the things she ingrained in you as a child that, suddenly rang ahead in your mind again? Any statements, any concepts that she really inculcated?
Oh, so much. So much. So there is nobody I know other actually than my parents-in-law. My parents-in-law were also of the same cut, of the same schnit, that literally everything is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu and everything is good. Everything is from Hashem and everything is good. We might not feel it. We might experience it as, complete suffering and pain and nothing is ever a punishment. I've gone to different shivas, unfortunately, that it could be a tragedy and my husband and I get called a lot to go to these things. And one of the places that I went to, so the mother, she says, this must be a punishment. A punishment? It was like the most foreign idea. She unfortunately, she lost her son. A punishment. The very notion, this is so not a punishment, but it feels like a punishment. And I get that. But because I think of, all of the Torah that I learned in my youth, my mother definitely it was never an idea that this is a punishment. On the contrary, it's a compliment. It means you are very close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that this specific neshama was given to you to take care of. And it's such a zchus to have a neshama that was only supposed to be here for, let's say, so I lost my brother when he was 5 and, I was 15. That was my first touch with anything like this, any kind of tragedy, like to this degree. And, I never heard my mother's anger towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, only love. And she just begged HaKadosh Baruch Hu for kaya.
Wow. Wow.
So I do as well. Because, it was fed to me with my morning tea. So beg Hashem for the koyach to overcome whatever he has thrown your way. But whatever he throws your way is specific to you. And I remember my mother saying, every neshama that's brought down into this world will struggle. That's pretty much a guarantee. And will have aggravation. And I said to her, but Baruch Menachem Mendel, who was only 2 and a bit, and he passed away, I said, I said to her, but Baruch Menachem Mendel didn't give me any aggravation. And my mother said, what do you call this? The other thing that I really learned from her and from the Chassidus that I was taught and, the Torah that I learned in my youth is that struggle is not a bad thing. In fact, struggle is the essence of what our human experience is supposed to be. So, the joy of the meaning is in the struggle. So when I was fighting for my health before my son passed away, when I was fighting for my health and I got my health back, but then it came back. So the sickness came back. But when I realized and I got my health back, I realized that whole journey had been amazing. Even though sitting in that oncology unit and having the poisons drip into your vein for hours and hours, every Friday and coming home sick and not being able to get out of bed because of the poisons that are now in your body that are killing off the cancer cells. It doesn't feel, you can easily fall into the pit of despair. You can. And maybe I did. I probably did. But afterwards, which gives
hope that even when you fall into despair, it's not like this end thing. It's like, then you get up again.
Okay. But that's not what you know when you're in despair. You don't know that you're going to get up again. Right. But then you get up again, but you can't say, I'm in the pit of despair right now, but don't worry. At 3:00, I'll be out. It's not like you can't compartmentalize your moods. Right. And I certainly didn't. I was too young to realize that I was going to get out of it, right? But it's only in hindsight. And one of the most beautiful things I read from Reb Baruch of Mezhebush was the Birchas HaShachar. So the only one of the Birchas HaShachar that's written in past tense is Sha'asa li kol tzarki, that he did for me all my needs. He made for me all that I need, right? He made all the other things. Paikeach Ivrim, he opens the eyes. Malbasharum, he clothes. It's in present tense, the naked. So the Sha'asali Kaltsarki is written in past tense. And the reason is because sometimes when we are going through something that we actually intrinsically need to go through, we don't recognize it as a bracha from Hashem, that we should say, Baruch Atah, blessed are you Hashem, for this that you've given me, because we don't recognize it at that time. While it's happening, we don't recognize it as this is what my neshama needs. But later, when you look in hindsight and you look and you say, oh wow, that was, whew. And Baruch Hashem, that He gave this to me. And Baruch Hashem, now I know that I have this history inside me, this story that is uniquely mine, this strength that has come out of it because it's mine. And you know, I have a friend who didn't have children for 15 years. And she once said to me, no one can take those 15 years away from me. Those 15 years are my special struggle years. I look at them with pride. No one can take that away from me. So yes, while we're going through it, it can feel like endless despair. But when we come out of it and we look back, we realize we are changed on such a fundamental, essential level that we can never go back to what we were before, right? And that's great, because what I was before is what I'm coming back to.
You know, I'm in awe of what you're sharing, and I would love to hear from you. There's what your mother taught you, and then there's now what we can teach the next generation. So people talk a lot about resilience today and the ability to face challenge. How can we empower our children to overcome?
Oh, there's loads of ways. First of all, we can be honest. We can be honest with our children, and we can share our own struggles with our children. And I think that that's something that my mother taught me. She definitely did not shy away from tears. She definitely did not shy away from talking. We talked, we shared, and that was so important to me. So we need to share with our children, and we need to tell them that we live in a prosperous time. We live in a time when fruits and vegetables, candies and breads and cakes are readily available. Everything is so available. And there's no Baruch Hashem, there's no war, there's always stuff happening, but there's no massive war. It's not affecting our day to day. You know, what was the worst thing that we did? That we had to sit in our homes and go on a laptop. Honestly, we're living in a very easy time. And I think that a lot of us, and including myself, believe that one of the goals of our lives is to avoid as much suffering and pain as possible. And I think it's unavoidable. And I think that the idea that gets somehow swallowed into our system that if you are struggling, you're not winning at this game of life, right? I think that that's a very poor thing to give to kids. And I don't know how I don't know how it's around even. I think it's so important to respect the struggle that you are going through, and respect the struggle that others are going through, and respect the human condition, which is to struggle. All of us don't want to see our children struggle. We all want to give our children ease. And I think that that is a massive problem. In fact, this is a part of the Constitution. I'm not sure, the pursuit, each man is permitted to their own pursuit of happiness. And the concept of pursuit of happiness, I'm totally quoting this wrong, totally wrong. But I just feel that the pursuit of happiness has caused unbelievable unhappiness in this world. Unbelievable, because happiness is actually a byproduct. It's not a goal. What is happiness? Happiness just happens to happen when you are focused, when you are goal-oriented, when you put in a good day's work, when you've organized your head, when you've organized your heart and your soul, and you're on a good track, you will unbelievably enough discover that you are happy. And I think that is exactly what happened to me. I was goal-oriented in that I had to get through a day. I had to get through another day. I had to, be a wife. I had to be a mother, even though I would say that in the beginning of my pain, I was pretty much an absentee mother. Like I was a bit hollow, I would say, that my older children, probably they were too young to realize, but I knew it. I knew that I was a hollow mother for a while there. I'd say about up until for sure the first 6 months, maybe even up until the first yard site, I was hollow inside, trying, forcing myself to take the next step and the next step.
Wow.
Just forcing myself to buy what I needed to buy for the house so they could function, make supper, sit down, lay the table, bring everybody together. Oh, it was so hard. But, I speak a lot, and I just did a C team, and I spoke about my story, which I'm not going to go into today. And one of the girls picked up her hand and she said, so if you're feeling so low, so miserable, and so much pain, how do you go on? Like, how do you take care of the day? And I couldn't believe it was coming out of my mouth, because I'm not usually so, I don't usually believe in this, but at that moment, I just said it. And I think that I really do believe in this. I didn't think I did. And that is, I said to her, fake it.
Wow.
As I said it, I was thinking, Esther, that's crazy. Right? Because I'm a very authentic person and I have a hard time faking it. But then I realized that, that is what sometimes I have to do. I'm a teacher, right? Baruch Hashem. I love teaching, passionate about teaching. Like, you click that icon, I don't stop talking. So when I'm going into a classroom, and I might have had a really bad night or a bad morning, or I'm just in a bad mood, those girls don't deserve a bad mood teacher. So I fake it. I do fake it. I just didn't realize that I faked it. I just say, good morning, girls. And it might not be that that's what's in my heart at that moment, but it becomes what's in my heart.
And we could do that as mothers too, by the way. I could wake up in the morning and I could be like, good morning, everybody.
We do that. So it can be that I need sometimes to fake it, but I have a goal. I want to do this right. Those girls deserve a good teacher. Those girls deserve everything. They don't deserve my bad mood. So I will fake it, and I will put one foot in front of the other. And I think that I've been doing that quite a bit, even though I would say I'm quite a transparent person, and was is like long as I've been sung, whatever I'm feeling, but I think that I still do rely on that, and it gets me through some really tough moments. And, I get to that good place, and the good place isn't the goal. The goal is to have a good class, or to have a wonderful supper with all my children around. Baruch Hashem, I'm at the stage of my life where I'm a bubba, and we have the Chinuch come in, and it's just amazing.
You're a young bubby.
They can do no wrong. Grandchildren, literally, they can do no wrong. And I happen to be a very neat and tidy person. When I come into my house, my grandchildren are there. The place is crazy. It's like rocking. And I remember that's what it used to be like when my kids were small. And because we are at the stage of life where that doesn't happen, fingerprints are all over the glass, and I really, the windows and everything, and I don't like that, but I love it because I've decided to love it, because these are my Chinuch and they can do no wrong. So I know it sounds a little fatalistic to say that every neshama is down here will struggle, right? So it sounds very doom, gloom, and disaster. I don't mean to sound like that. I just think that it is inevitable, because we are here to make the world different for our being here. And that's only going to come through our struggling through whatever it is we need to accomplish. So don't feel that you need to avoid struggle. I had during Zoom, so there was a time when my school were learning in basements. Canada went berserk over this pandemic. It was a disaster to live here. It used to be a wonderful country. Don't ask. Every morning there were like these 3 girls that would come late to where they were going, that were to the house. So I said, why are you coming late? They would come on their bikes, and they said, Oh, because we don't want to go uphill. We only want to go downhill. So we've got a route where you only, where you only go downhill. I said, girls, there's no such thing. It doesn't exist. You are going to have to struggle going uphill at one point. So stop it. Okay. So I think there's this drive that people have, including myself, to avoid pain, right? To avoid
or escape.
And just do whatever we can not to have to feel the pain, and I just, I think that we have to really just change that whole mindset and remember that our particular journey here in this world is going to have ups and downs, and the downs are there to inform us and to strengthen us and to make us be who we're essentially supposed to be. So it's actually a wonderful thing. And then, of course, there's that, when you struggle going up the hill and then you just go wee all the way down. And it's a lot of fun, the wind through your hair, it feels great, And I think that through the struggle, we can actually come to a place of pure happiness when we recognize the beauty of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's world. Because if we didn't have it taken away, like if we didn't struggle for something and then taking things for granted, I heard from Rabbi Mendel Kaplan a beautiful mashal about what Hasidus does. It says you can go through a museum and you can see all the artifacts and nothing touches you because you're just looking and looking. And then you walk on, you go to the next one, you walk on, you walk on, you walk on. But when you go into the museum with a guide, and the guide tells you where each artifact is from and what the importance, the significance of that artifact, suddenly your eyes are opened and you just have a far more rich experience of your trip in this museum. And that's what Hasidus does in our lives. So, everything in our lives could be completely taken for granted. Don't even notice, whatever, next, right? But Hasidus tells us to stop and look and hone in and focus and see the richness of our lives. And it's like when your eyes are open, you can't help but choose to be so grateful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when you're living in that place of gratitude, then happiness just happens. So yes, we are here in this world to struggle, but during the struggle, know that this is good. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, and just show up, take it.
Wow.
So when a kid comes and says, "Oh, this happened and that happened," I'm a bit sarcastic sometimes. So one of my students, she says to me, "I had a really bad night and my mother wanted me to tidy my room and blah." And she's going on all a bunch of things that were where I happen to know she has a very, very lovely home life. And I was like, who's going to play you in the movie? It's terrible. And she did not enjoy that response. But honestly, we really got to give reality checks to our kids. It's their lives are so rich and so so easy. We also have to have our children strive for something, right? And they also need. When a child is complaining, kvetching to me about a test, I'm not listening. The child should only know. I'm just, Mrs. Zirkind, today. Mrs. Zirkind, you usually give us a week before a test. Now you're giving it to us on Friday. I love you, but you're doing this test on Friday.
Wow, you sound like you demand a lot from your students. So, how would you deal with, putting tests aside? What would you do, or how would you talk to your kids about using something like AI instead of giving you a report?
Right. I just actually had a discussion a couple of weeks ago with my student. But I want you to know I'm not just hard on my students. I'm actually hard on my kids as well. I have very high expectations. Most of the time I don't have to actually say them. They're just there, tacit expectations. And they do need, and they feel good about it, by the way. Yeah, some of them give me a hard time with it, but they do feel good once they've, adopted this attitude or, a different standard. And So one of the things that came up a couple of weeks ago was Chat GPT. I didn't do Facebook. I don't do Instagram. I don't do any of this stuff, right? So I'm really like a little bit of a dinosaur. But anyway, so I spoke to the girls about this. I said to the girls, listen, you could, if you want, you can cheat on a test. You can get your friend's paper. You can put it in front of yours and you can copy all the answers and you can hand it in to me and you will get 100%. Because you know what? I'm not so smart and I'm not going to be able to tell. So you want to use, there's this new thing called AI. I don't know if they heard of it or whatever. You tell the computer what you were looking for and the computer just spews back to you sentence after sentence and you could use all those sentences and you could hand them to me as your assignment and I would give you an A or an A plus because you know why? I'm not so smart, right? I can't tell. So you would have won, really. But why? Why would you do that? Why would you rob yourself of the opportunity to gain a skill, to gain a piece of knowledge, to research, to find out for yourself, to struggle putting the words into sentences that are coherent? It's a skill. You might not be very good at it, but you are the one that needs to do it in order to get better. I teach in the morning Chumash, Ivris or Ivrit, depending on your political stance, and Parsha. And in the afternoon, I actually teach English to basic English at grade 7 and 8.
Oh, wow.
So I said to them, there would be literally no point for you to do that at all. Because you are lying, you've gotten a grade that you did not earn. But the worst thing is that you robbed yourself of an opportunity to grow. And you won't feel good about it. You won't feel good about it for years to come. Whereas if you really do your research and you put your work onto paper and you hand in your work, you might not get the A that the computer could generate for you. You might get a B plus, but that B plus will be worth so much more to you than any garbage grade that you did not earn.
It's amazing. I wish I had you as a teacher. I love that you have these expectations and high standards, but the truth is you're also like brimming with love. So I want to I'm curious. I want to ask you about that. Like with the high standards and with everything, how do you give over the love of Yiddishkeit, the passion of Yiddishkeit, the joy of Yiddishkeit? Because I'm sure whether you're teaching English or Chumash, that's coming through to your students. So how do you do that? And the reason why I'm asking that is, you're a mother, you're a bubby, you're a teacher, you have all these roles, and everyone who's listening, I'm sure we have a lot to benefit. So what do you have to say about that?
So my go-to answer is, you're not going to believe this, but I actually tell my girls every so often that I love them. I do. Because they kvetch and kvetch plenty. So I have a girl who's like, oh, Mrs. Zirkind, why are you in the And I'm like, Rachel, I'm going to tell you. I happen to love you. If I did not love you, I wouldn't be pushing you. I really wouldn't. I would just, blah, blah, get away with whatever we can get away with. Minimal. I did my job. You did yours. I'm the teacher. You're the student. You did yours minimally. I did mine minimally. Yay, we're done. That is what I would do if I did not love you. It happens to be that I love you. So this gets them all very awkward, But I don't care. Why do we need to be afraid of the truth? This is the truth. I want the best for every one of my students. I want the best for every one of my kids. So I will push them. I do push them. I think that the love of Yiddishkeit has to be modeled. It has to come from a true place within you, within all of us, right? So, davening, I do not use the time for davening to catch up on marking or anything. I love davening, and I love davening with my girls. I daven shachos with my girls in the morning, and I daven mincha with them in the afternoon. And we have a very, very special golden rule. I know that not everyone agrees with me. I cannot force a girl to daven. I cannot force a boy to daven. But I don't insist. But I have found that this has actually worked way better than forcing the girls to.
So what's the rule?
I have this one rule, but it goes with all the other things that stand behind the rule, right? So behind the rule is we're davening now and Everybody is invited to join and connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu right now. And then there's this one rule. And the rule is don't distract. Don't distract the misfollowing. Meaning to say that if you've chosen today to be the day that you're going to, be in an isolated mood and you're not, holding by davening right now, that's not my business. But my business is that you're not allowed to distract the other misfollowing. And I have found that there has been a tremendous amount of hatzlacha when you do not force and you just model and you teach them some, here and there the meanings, and you show a delight in davening. You sit and you show the students that this is important to you. And if it's important to you, it will become important to them. But give it time, because we don't know where anybody's coming from. Every student has their own peckle, right? So you can have a student that just doesn't, at this point in their lives, at this point in their journey, doesn't relate or doesn't feel it right now. So you're going to force that. I'm not so strong about forcing, because it's avodas halev. You can't force avodas halev. It has to come, so you can set it up that it should happen naturally, and it does. It does. If you set it up my husband and I have this story from our oldest son, actually, who's Baruch Hashem, extremely strong, with tons of years Shemayim. He's a younger man with Baruch Hashem, family. When he was about 10 years old or 9 or whatever, he went to camp, and he went to day camp. And about 3 or 4 weeks into day camp, they called us up and they said, Mrs. Zirkind, could you please ask your husband to stop taking your son to early morning shacharis? And I was like, he doesn't. He doesn't. My husband doesn't take my son to daven shacharis with the minyan. So he goes to camp and he davens in camp. And they said, well, actually, he told us that your husband takes him to shul. So basically, for a month, this 10-year-old boy was not davening. For a whole month, he told us that he was davening in camp, and he told camp that he was davening at home in shul, right? And my husband and I sat and we said, okay, what are we going to do? Now, this is our first child, what do we, it's scary when it's your first and you have no experience in this and you don't know where it's going to end and what's going to be and blah, blah. So we were like, okay, what are we going to do? And my husband said the best word, nothing. We're going to do nothing. We're not going to say, we're going to back off. We have no right to force him to do anything. We can't get involved. All we can do is model. And it'll come. But Ezras Hashem. And we can daven that it does. We can daven that it come naturally. And Baruch Hashem, actually before his bar mitzvah, he asked for a Torah or Siddur. And this is his Siddur. In fact, when it was falling into complete disrepair, he didn't want to buy a new Torah or Siddur. He took this Torah or Siddur and he went to Williamsburg where they put
bookbinding?
Bookbinder. And I think he spent like $300 to rebind this Torah or Siddur that he had since his bar mitzvah. And that's the Siddur that he uses to this day.
Wow.
And this is a boy who at the age of 9 or 10 did not see that he had a need to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu during the month of July or August or whatever it was. And we stepped back. And I think that that's something that I learned. It was very, very counterintuitive. I admit, but I'm very grateful that my husband, did what he did.
Wow. We touched a little bit on your first book, which is like your real life, but you also wrote this novel and I found it so fascinating. So, descriptive. And so you have such keen insight into the psyche of a person. It's beautiful. But you describe this little boy, Aaron, who is has an awful relationship with his school and keeps getting in trouble. And there's a lot of tension. So I'm wondering, you sound like an amazing teacher and Baruch Hashem, a very loving mother. How do we avoid that tension? How do we build positive relationships with our children and keep the connection strong?
Okay. I will say that the novel is set in a specific time, in a specific era, which we have, Baruch Hashem, moved away from. Okay. So for example, I was talking to an old friend this past summer, and she was telling me something that was triggered by reading my book. And she said to me, this and this and this happened. And I said, well, why didn't anybody do anything about it? She goes, well, I didn't tell anyone. So I said, what do you mean you didn't tell anyone? She says, well, I didn't tell my mother. I didn't even think to tell my mother. And I think that is a huge part of why some of these things happen. I'm not going to say that things that happened in the novel happens everywhere and at all times. I think it can. It certainly has the potential, but I think that, decades ago, there was a time when these kind of things happened on a much more common basis. So one of the things that we can do as mothers is that we can make sure that our supper table, I'm being very practical now, because I know that it can happen anytime, but supper is a really important hour, that it should be family time and we should share. And that can be modeled by mothers and fathers. I think that it's really important for fathers to be there as well at the supper table, if at all possible. I know some fathers work later hours and is supper time. In my house, Baruch Hashem, when all my children were home, it was very conducive. My home life was very conducive to family suppers because my husband was always working at home in the afternoon. He would teach in the morning and work at home in the afternoon. He had a home office. So he was always there at the supper table. And bedtimes are also wonderful times to really connect with each and every kid, lying in bed with the child, just chatting about your day, model how chatting looks like when you talk about your day. And then the child is very likely to you want to add to what happened in his day or in her day. It's, when we're knowledgeable and when we're aware of what's going on in our children's lives, that's when how we can, really hone in and figure out, stop things from going wrong, right? Then, of course, there's building resilience in the children, with bullying, for example. So there's many, many books out there how to build resilience with kids. And one of the things that would happen, what I used to say when my kids would come home and so this kid had been bullied or that kid had been bullied. And one of the things I love to say, and I don't know, I would, process whatever it was that was going on. But then I would, at the end, I would say, so just remember this feeling. Just hold this feeling of being victimized, of being not understood, of being maybe humiliated. Just hold on to it for a little while so that you know what it feels like. And then make sure you never do that to somebody else. So that kind of gives an empowerment. You're not always a victim because you could give as much as you get, right? But don't. Hold yourself back because you know what that feels like. Wow. Now, I don't know if I was the best mother to have done that, but I know that it worked for us because it also put things into a perspective. Everybody goes through these bullying situations. We all have packages that we're schlepping around with us from our childhood. Our hearts remember, our bodies remember, there's lots of memories that we all have. And there's a reason why we have to go through all of it. There's really a reason why. Nothing is arbitrary.
I'm curious about something.
Sure.
You mentioned the word empowering. How did you give your kids the confidence to be Zirkins? I mean, the Zirkins have very high standards and they might dress a little bit differently.
So that's a really interesting question because I never thought about it. It was never a discussion. For example, the lavush, that my children have a lavush, my husband has a lavush, our family has a lavush. Yeah, it's great. I love it. I think my boys are so handsome. I really do. And I tell them that. Oh my goodness. since you're bar mitzvah, you're so handsome. Because they wear kapatas when they're bar mitzvah and their pays go up under their yarmulke. And I just think they blossom, when they put that on. They're so excited, by the way, to put them, from my first son, and I have, I have 6 sons, but 5 of them, one of them is in the Yeshiva Shalmaila right now, but 5 of them we put through bar mitzvah, and each one just grew once they put on the kapata. They held their shoulders up high, and they, Jivas, But it was never a discussion, other than they couldn't wait. It was never a discussion that they look different.
No one ever teased them or asked them about it.
Oh, so it's interesting because I think with my oldest, he paved the way for all my others. So when my oldest was bar mitzvah, soon after his bar mitzvah, he went to yeshiva. And now he's in yeshiva with older bachrim. So but he would come home. He would come home at night and he would come home for Shabbos. I don't like when my boys dorm early. I never let my boys dorm early. They could only start dorming when they were past the years of being vulnerable. And then they could dorm, 16. I would let them go dorm between 15 and 16. Even though here in Toronto, it was mandatory dorming. We, Baruch Hashem, we got away with it.
Zirkind.
And because I think, there was a few of us that were just, no, our kids not dorming. But anyway, so they would come home. So one day he comes home and I was like, Chaim Moshe, that's my oldest son's name is Chaim Moshe. I said, Chaim Moshe, did the Bachram ever say anything to you about your lavush? He says, yeah. I said, what did they say? He said, I can have some Bachram come, why do you have to dress like that? Why do you have to dress like that? Says, so what do you say? So he says, I just tell them, Azoi, and I walk away. I was like, wow, cool, good on you, When my husband and I were dating, and I asked him about the lavush, and when he explained it to me, it was just so beautiful. I just thought, oh yeah, this is fine. Also, it's not so strange to me. I have to disclose the fact that I did grow up in Stamford Hill. In Stamford Hill, all the Hasidishes and the Lubavitchers, we all live together on the same street. We give Shalach Manes, I give to Satma, Bob, Bells, whoever's on my street, we're all friends, right? So when I went out with my husband, it wasn't so foreign, And Baruch Hashem, I have found also, I have Baruch Hashem 3 married sons. And I have found the lavush to be an incredible filter for me. It's a wonderful tool. Now, I'm not speaking disparagingly on anybody. Because we have a lavush, and because that means that the Einikot will have payers and, and that, all that it goes with. So when girls come up for shidduchim, they have to know that in advance. And I have found that if they don't like that, kol hakavod, they don't have to like it, and they don't want it, it's good, because then it's not for us.
An indicator.
It's not for us. And I'm not saying anything bad about these girls. They're wonderful girls. But for us, it's not going to work. So I have found the lavush of the Zirkinds to be a wonderful filter.
Esther, there's something that I wanted to ask you. As I read your first book, I'm going back to your first book for a second. I literally sobbed reading it, but I also hear what you're saying. Almost, how do you reconcile where on the one hand you have these really idealistic concepts of Torah and Chassidus, and on the other hand, you're really open, surprisingly so, by the way. I did not expect it when I read it. You're so open about your human emotion, and I'm just curious, how do you, on the one hand, have these lofty concept of Emunah and everything Hashem does is for the good, and on the other hand, it seems like there's this humanity that we possess. So how does that go?
Well, I just don't see it as a contradiction. First of all, you should know that when I started writing the first book, which took 10 years from starting to write until it got published, it was 10 years. And I promised myself, I made a hachlata to myself that I was going to be absolutely honest. And I was not going to pretend that when I was having a tantrum that didn't happen, or when I was snarky that didn't happen, because I really felt that with my writing, whatever's going to happen with it, I didn't know if it was going to be published or not, but I just wanted to give myself permission to be honest. And I wanted to give, if it would ever get published, I wanted to give readers permission to be human, to just be human, to cry when it hurts, to be angry, to despair, to be on the brink, to do things that you really are taught is the worst possible thing that you could do. And yet you went and did it, you know? Okay. So I'm not talking about Averas. I'm talking about, like, you know, things that I said, things that I thought. They weren't all so pretty. It wasn't pretty. And I just feel like you say that the loftiness of Torah and Chassidus, I don't agree with you. When you learn Tanya, it is so practical and it is so human and it is so validating. And I think that if you ever learn a piece of Torah or a piece of Chassidus that makes you feel like you're evil because you're human, I think you're learning it wrong. I think you're being taught wrong. Like, I'll give you an example. Ma'ir Shalat al Halev. I speak about this a lot. I'm sure you've seen it whenever you've seen me, because I speak about it a lot. It was something, and I know I learned it wrong. It was something inside me that when I was growing up, that was such a burden to me, because I'm a very emotional person and I'm full on emotion. And I was brought up by an emotional person, my mother, who was full on emotion, and she wasn't afraid of being emotional, right? And that's coming from England, where emotions are sinful. But anyway, I think that during those years where I thought that there was something bad about all this intense feeling that I would have, and I would always tell that, you know, the essence of Chassidus is to control yourself. The essence of Chassidus is to control yourself. I need to control myself. And I was very poor at controlling myself when I was growing up, right? But when I went through what I did, what happened to me, what happened to us, and I was now dealing with such raw emotions, such big emotions. They were so overwhelming and overpowering. I had to come up with a different idea, because otherwise I would really get swallowed up by my own self-condemnation. And so with the learning that took place during that time, made me understand that all those years that I thought that having emotion was bad was my bad interpretation of what was going on. What I really needed to do was to process, and that's what I was doing without realizing it. So all these big emotions that seemed to take over were actually extremely important and extremely informative. And ignore it at your peril, right? So
how do you understand Ma'ir Shalat al Halev today?
Today, Ma'ir Shalat al Halev means, okay, I'm feeling something. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? I'm panicking. Why am I panicking? I better close my mouth right now before I say something stupid, while this emotion is washing right through me. And let me tell you, I wasn't always like this. This is the new and improved version of me. And that is that, I was in a movie, no plug here, but I was in a movie called The Sister's Tale. And it was 4 women by women here in Toronto. It was an amazing experience. And we had the first showing, September of this past September. It was downtown, fancy theater, cocktails, blah, blah. And my daughters were coming with me. And I was just feeling unbelievable panic and anxiety. And I wanted how I would dress. I wanted my girls to dress a certain way. This is like Joe will then be sitting in the front and so much panic. And I realized that I was like not very pleasant to be around. And then I started driving and I closed my mouth and we're driving towards downtown. I'm thinking, what is going on here? Why am I being so unpleasant? I'm not looking forward to tonight. I'm really scared about what tonight's going to show. I don't know how to behave at a first showing of a movie that I'm in. I don't know what the expectations are going to be like. I'm panicking. I'm anxious. This has nothing to do with my girls that are sitting in the car. This is all about my panic and my anxiety. I have to process that. Breathe. Okay. Now, when your voice is nice and pretty and normal and calm, open it and apologize. Which is exactly what I did. I said, girls, I have to apologize for yelling before to get into the car and why are you wearing this? Why aren't you wearing that? Because that's what I was saying to them. So it really has nothing to do with you and I really want to take it all back. I'm just panicking inside me because I've never experienced this before. I've never gone to a first showing of a movie that I'm in. And I don't know what the expectations are. And I think that is why I was behaving this way. And I really deeply apologize. I hope you're okay. So, it was being honest with myself and processing the feeling and then taking responsibility for it. So I think that Mayach Shalit al Halev for me today means feel it and process it. Get it up to your brain. Know where it's coming from. Know that you must not react to that feeling, but you do need to give that feeling space, right? So you need to be respectful of whatever it is you're feeling. But if it's going to do damage, don't react to it. Okay. But sit with it. That for me is Mayach Shalit al Halev. I think I had a very strong training for this during the time when I was mourning for the loss of our son. So my father-in-law would call up every so often, and I didn't always pick up the phone, but one time I picked up the phone. I was in a foul mood, and he asked me the unfortunate question, and how are you doing? And I said, bad. He said, bad. I said, yes, I had a lot of questions. And of course, the questions that I had are not questions that have answers. There are some questions that are not answerable in this world, right? And those are the questions, of course, that I have. And he said, well, so long as you're asking. And that made me feel so good because nobody was condemning me. Nobody was saying, you're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to ask that. You're not allowed to feel that. Nobody was saying that. Everybody was providing space for all of that which I was experiencing. So I'm very, very grateful. Very grateful.
Wow. You're unbelievable. We covered so much in this conversation, but believe it or not, time passed. So, what is something that you want to leave our listeners with? What is one thing you would want them to know?
So I think one of the things that was modeled to me also as a child, and I absolutely firmly believe in this, and I give it over to my family in many different ways and to my students and whoever at this idea. And my mother did teach this to us, but I don't know if she actually said it the way I'm going to say it, or this is just how she lived her life and I encapsulate it in this way. But my mother always used to say that no matter what HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends you, no matter the challenges, the world does not owe you a thing. You are not owed a thing. And if you think that you can rely on the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has caused you to suffer and therefore you can be mean or you can be cruel or you can be dismissive of someone else, that is wrong. you still have to be a mensch. You still have to treat the world with kindness, no matter what. Recently, I just came across a conversation that was particularly difficult to hear. And I asked a mashpia of mine, you know, what do I do with that particular conversation? I'm not going to go into any detail. And the mashpia said to me, what do you want? This and this and this has happened to her. This and this and this has happened to her. And I can't decide all that. I can't. Just because, and I'm not dismissing her pain. I'm not. But again, the world doesn't owe you anything. You still have to be kind. So when you choose to be kind and loving in the face of unfair and treatment or hurtful treatment, actually the most amazing thing happens, because the person or the people that are interacting with you are not expecting your kindness. They're expecting hurt to be, to provoke more hurt. And you could feel angry, but if you choose to react with kindness and love, because you're on this trajectory of self-improvement regardless, then you have really shown a different way. And the people that are in your sviva, the people that are in your environment, they become more loving and more kind. So you've actually affected positive change just because you've chosen to not react unkindly to unkindness, but the opposite.
Wow. This is, I've read it, but hearing things out of your mouth and with your expression is just transformative in a very, very powerful and deep way. I definitely gained a lot from this, and I know our listeners will. So thank you so, so, so much, Ester, for giving your heart to all of us and sharing it with your boundless love and passion, and your feelings come through, and you're channeling your feelings in the most positive of ways. So it's so beautiful. And yeah, thank you everyone who's listening. Make sure to subscribe to the Optimizing Mothers podcast. Share this podcast with your friends. And thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share.